everyone, and welcome to my Raymarching devlog. Today I'm going to share my game called Babel, which is a Raymarch game in Unity. Here you can see some gameplay of Babel. You play as a little orb, exploring an endless world. Let's dive into how I made it. So let's start by talking about Raymarching and signed distance functions, or SDFs. Raymarching is a rendering technique that allows us to create complex 3D scenes using mathematical functions, rather than traditional meshes you would see in Unity or any other standard game engines. Essentially, we're tracing rays that measure the distance to a closest surface in the scene. This distance will then tell us how much we can march along our ray's direction before we hit something. We will repeatedly step along the ray by this distance until we get close enough to a surface or we get too far away from our starting point. This technique is super powerful because it lets us render detailed and intricate shapes with smooth surfaces using SDFs. To get a bit more into SDFs, they are mathematical functions that give us the signed distance from any point to the surface of a shape. So outside of a shape, we'll get a positive distance, and on inside of a shape, we'll get a negative distance. These SDFs allow us to tell whether our ray is intersecting with an object. We can combine SDFs in interesting ways to create more complex scenes and shapes with operations like union, subtraction, and intersection. Additionally, you can rotate, scale, bend, skew, and any combination of those things. My journey started on shadertoy. It's a great website for learning shaders. I started by creating a 2D Raymarching example, and then I moved on to a 3D one. After these initial experiments, I became more comfortable and decided to move on to my Raymarching game in Unity. I began by implementing a basic Raymarching shader that interacts with Unity meshes, but eventually I decided not to use the interaction with normal meshes because I thought the game would be more novel if everything was Raymarched. In this process of creating the shader, I added a Lambertian lighting model with support for directional and point lights. I then began the process of experimenting with combining different shapes, repeating them, rotating them, and eventually I landed on this world full of cubes with hollowed out spheres on the inside. To hide the limited ray distance, I added a fog to make it feel more infinite. I then went on to create a basic player SDF, which you can see here. It's basically a shell with an interior diamond that rotates. Though I wanted to make the game more complex in the end, I felt it was in a good place and I had learned a lot. After going through Raymarching, I'm eager to learn more rendering techniques, which is partially why I ended development of Babel so early. The lighting model is basic and lacks shadows, so it's something I'd like to revisit in the future. There's also some inaccuracies in banding on certain shapes. I believe this has something to do with the operations being applied to the shapes, but if anyone knows what's happening specifically, feel free to comment below. Overall, creating Babel was a fun experience. I learned so much about shaders and graphics programming, and I'm excited to keep learning. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully you'll see more from me in the future.